My name is Maeve Morgan, and I'm 35 years old. If you ask my neighbors, they'd say I'm the quiet one on the block. The woman who always pays her HOA dues early, brings in everyone's packages when it rains, and somehow keeps her hedges the exact same length year-round. If you asked my boyfriend's coworkers, at least before last month, they'd probably describe me a little differently. The broke girlfriend. The freeloader. The woman lucky enough to have a high-earning boyfriend. Funny how people can be so loud about your life while knowing absolutely nothing about it. Hey, Reddit. Whatever you're drinking, keep it nearby. This isn't a feel-sorry-for-me story. It's the story of how I pretended to lose everything, just to find out who, in my life, was already gone. I'll start with the part everyone thinks is the beginning. The night at the Belmont Grand Ballroom. It's one of those places where money doesn't just sit in the room, it echoes. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, so expensive you feel guilty setting a fork on them. Waiters gliding around like they're on invisible tracks. The kind of place where people don't raise their voices, they raise their egos. My boyfriend Ethan works at a tech company called Helix Dynamics. Big glass building, bigger politics. He's a project manager, which is corporate for professional firefighter and professional email writer. He's smart, ambitious, good at making people feel like their ideas are important, even when they're not. It's one of the things I used to love about him. He insisted I come to this gala. You never come to my work events, he said, standing in the doorway of my office at home, the one he jokingly called your cave. It'd look good if you were there. Plus, they should see the woman I'm doing all this for. Sweet, right? Only by then, I'd already told him I'd been laid off. According to the story I sold him a few months earlier, my company had downsized. I'd said I got a severance package, that I'd be between things for a while. I told him I had savings and I'd be fine. I just needed time to figure out what was next. He'd squeezed my hand, kissed my forehead, and said we'd get through it together. Then, slowly the comments started. I'm carrying us now. It's fine, really. You'll find something eventually. Maybe this is good for you. You always work too much. Nothing nasty. Nothing you could pin to a wall and say, here, see? This is cruelty. Just small, sharp little phrases left on the counter like dirty dishes, easy to ignore, until they stacked. By the time the Belmont Gala rolled around, Ethan was thriving at work, and I, in the story he believed, was still figuring it out. In his world, he was the provider. In mine, I was running an experiment. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of my black dress. Simple, clean lines, nothing too flashy. I've never liked screaming my worth with sequins. The only jewelry I wore was a thin gold bracelet my late father gave me when I signed my first big contract. Wow, Ethan said when I walked out. You clean up nice for a broke girl. He meant it as a joke. He always did. I smiled anyway, filed the line away with all the others, and let him spin me once in the hallway. He looked sharp in his suit, navy with a tie that matched my dress. Picture perfect. The ambitious corporate man and his supportive girlfriend. On the drive there, he talked about office gossip, who might be promoted, who might be on their way out. I listened, nodding in the right places, my mind half on his words and half on my own plan. There was one name he lingered on more than necessary, Tessa. His ex. They'd dated years before I came into the picture. According to him, it fizzled out naturally, and they were just friends now. According to my gut, she still liked knowing she had a reserved seat in his life. She's on the same team as me for this new product rollout, he said. She's been intense about it. Keeps asking why you never come to events. Why does she care? I asked lightly. He shrugged. You know how she is, competitive. She likes having all the information. Translation. She likes knowing where she ranks in his world. I just hummed and turned my face toward the window, watching the lights smear past in the glass. The city looked beautiful from the passenger seat. Clean, distant, manageable. The Belmont Grand Ballroom was buzzing when we arrived. Helix banners, sponsors, tables arranged in perfect symmetrical circles. One side of the room was executives and board members, polished, practiced. The other was employees like Ethan and Tessa, eager, hungry, trying not to look at the first group too directly. Babe, Ethan said, touching my lower back as we walked in. You okay? Fine, I said, just remembering which fork to use. He laughed, a little too loud, like he wanted everyone to hear. Use any fork you want. It's not like we can't afford another set. We. I let that one pass. I was counting bigger things tonight. He led me to their table. Tessa was already there. She was as pretty as her social media suggested. Dark hair in a sleek bun, red lipstick that said I meant to be seen, a dress that could have paid a month of someone's rent. Her eyes skimmed me from head to toe in one quick scan that both approved and dismissed me. "This must be Maeve," she said, standing to air kiss my cheek. "The famous girlfriend." "Nice to finally meet you," I replied, matching her smile. It didn't reach either of our eyes. "Ethan's told us so much," she continued, sliding back into her seat. "We were starting to think you were imaginary." "She's real," Ethan said, pulling out my chair. "Just busy." "Busy with what these days?" A male voice cut in from my right. I turned to see John Wilson, one of Ethan's coworkers. Tall, loud, the kind of guy whose laugh reached the table before he did. He grinned at me like I was a punchline he'd been saving. "I mean, Ethan keeps saying he's carrying things right now," John added. "Must be nice having a sugar daddy, huh?" The table chuckled. It wasn't a roar, not at first, just a warm ripple of sound, people laughing because everyone else was. The sound slid over me like oil. Ethan's smile went tight. "Come on, man," he said. "Don't be a jerk." But Tessa laughed. "Oh, relax," she said, bumping Ethan's arm. "We're kidding. We just want to know what she does all day. Netflix, yoga, luxury unemployment?" More laughter. Someone from another table turned to look. I took a sip of water to give myself a second. In their version of reality, I was the woman living off a man's paycheck, a pretty accessory, an expense line item in someone else's budget. If I'd told them the truth, that I've spent the last 15 years quietly owning 90% of the company that paid their salaries, they'd call that a joke too. "Mostly I read," I said calmly, setting my glass down, "and fix things." "Fix things?" John repeated. "Like DIY projects? That's cute." "Systems," I said. "The kind people only realize are broken when everything's already on fire." Something in my tone made Tessa tilt her head, but she let it go. The waiters glided in with appetizers that looked like art projects. The CEO, Richard Larson, clinked his glass at the front of the room and gave a speech about market growth and innovation. Everyone clapped in the right places. Ethan leaned in to whisper something about a promotion he was hoping for. I nodded, smiled, let him see the support he was so proud to show off. But even as I watched the stage, I was listening to the table. "Ethan, you really are a saint," someone said. "Most guys would have dipped by now." "Yeah," John added. "My girlfriend tried that finding herself thing once. I told her to find rent while she was at it." "Maeve has savings," Ethan said quickly. "She's not—" "Relax," Tessa cut in, laughing. "We're just saying you're really stepping up. Carrying her, carrying the team." She lifted her glass in a little toast. "To Ethan, the man holding everything together." Glasses clinked. Mine stayed on the table. I looked at Ethan then, not at his suit or his smile, but at his eyes. I wanted to see if he'd pull away from the joke, if he'd shut it down. He didn't. He just raised his glass and played along. "That's what partners do," he said, the words smooth and rehearsed. "We carry each other when we need to." Partners. Funny word when only one person is allowed to be heavy. I felt something settle inside me. Not shock, that had burned out weeks ago, but something colder. A decision hardening like concrete. By the time dessert plates appeared, I'd memorized every face at our table. Who laughed first? Who laughed hardest? Who watched and said nothing? When the room noise dipped between speeches, I glanced toward the front and caught Richard Larson's eye. He was standing near the stage, talking to a sponsor, his glass half full of champagne. I smiled, slow and polite, and lifted my hand in a small wave. He frowned faintly, like he was trying to place me. He didn't know my face, but I knew his signature. Ethan noticed the look. "You okay?" he asked. I turned back to him, my smile calm and steady. "Yeah," I said. "I just realized something." "What?" I let my eyes sweep over the table one more time, Ethan basking in attention, Tessa smirking, John already reaching for another drink. Then I looked back at Ethan and said quietly, "Tonight is going to be one of those nights people remember for the rest of their careers." He laughed, thinking I meant the speeches, the food, the fancy venue. He had no idea. And that was the moment I stopped wondering whether I'd go through with it. I already had. The laughter at the table kept building as John kept throwing jabs, one after the other, but it didn't faze me. I knew this was only the beginning. The more they mocked me, the more the truth was becoming clear to me. This wasn't just about Ethan's career or their misguided perceptions. It was about who was truly in control, who was laughing with me, and who was laughing at me. Ethan seemed to take their teasing with a light heart, but I saw the cracks. He wasn't just rolling with the punches, he was encouraging them. And that was when it hit me like a tidal wave of realization. He wasn't just embarrassed by me, he was embarrassed for me. The same man who once told me that we were in this together now saw me as a liability. I glanced around the table, scanning the faces of the people who thought they had me all figured out. The CEO, Richard Larson, laughed along with the others, though it was clear he wasn't entirely comfortable. He knew something was off, but I wasn't interested in his discomfort. I wanted to see how far they'd go, how much they would expose themselves when they thought I was powerless. Then John, ever the obnoxious office clown, went too far. Man, I gotta say, he continued, with that stupid grin of his, Jade's really killing it at work. I mean, carrying your whole life while you just sit at home playing video games. I bet you spend your days waiting for her to get home so you can make her dinner, huh? The table erupted into laughter. Even Richard cracked a smile. Ethan, looking embarrassed, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. John, come on, that's enough. But John wasn't finished. He was on a roll now, and I could see he was enjoying himself too much to stop. So seriously, what does she do all day? Is she like starting a hobby? Or maybe she's just getting really good at picking out outfits for you. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my smile firmly in place. I wasn't going to let them see that they'd pierced through my calm exterior. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms and keeping my eyes fixed on John. You seem pretty obsessed with me, John, I said, my voice light, almost amused. Should I be flattered or concerned? For a split second, I saw his smug expression falter. It was just enough time for me to realize I had him on the back foot. But then he recovered, his grin returning, though it was a little less certain now. Come on, Maeve, he chuckled awkwardly. It's just a joke. No need to get all serious. Oh, I'm not serious, I replied, taking a sip from my water glass. I just think it's funny how obsessed you are with my routine. A few heads turned, and a quiet tension started to settle in. I could see some of the other people at the table shifting uncomfortably. Ethan, however, just sighed and nudged my arm. Maeve, stop. But I wasn't done. Yeah, I continued, leaning forward slightly. You know, it's what people say when they run out of things to say that are actually intelligent. The laughter around the table died down for a moment. There was an awkward silence before John attempted to laugh it off. Okay, I get it, he said, raising his glass in some sort of feeble apology. Just messing with you. But I didn't back down. Instead, I sat up straight, my eyes narrowing just slightly as I looked around the table. My voice dropped, low and steady. Yeah, well, I said, here's something you might want to know. I could feel the entire room go still. Ethan's expression shifted from embarrassment to confusion. John wasn't laughing anymore, and the CEO, Richard, actually leaned forward, his attention now fully on me. Enjoy the rest of your night, Richard, I said, addressing him directly, because you might want to enjoy the next few days too. Richard blinked, clearly taken aback. What do you mean? He stammered. I glanced at the other people around the table, letting the silence drag on for a beat before I continued, keeping my tone calm, even a little bored. Because in less than 10 minutes, you're going to find out exactly who you're laughing at, I said. Richard's face shifted, his grip on his wine glass tightening, his smile now gone. He looked to Ethan for some explanation, but Ethan was lost, still processing what was happening. John, sensing the shift, tried to brush it off. Come on, Maeve, it's just a joke, man. Don't take it so seriously. But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I stood up, not making a scene, but making my point clear as I turned toward the door. Take it seriously when you realize that the joke's always been on you, I muttered under my breath. And with that, I walked away, leaving the table in stunned silence. As I stepped out into the hotel's grand lobby, I could hear the murmurs and whispers starting behind me. Tessa's voice cut through the air, calling Ethan's name, but I didn't turn around. Ethan was going to have to figure this one out on his own. The moment the ballroom doors closed behind me, the noise faded. Not just the laughter, but the heat of humiliation that had been simmering beneath my skin all night. The lobby of the Belmont Grand Ballroom felt colder, quieter, like stepping out of a storm into a vacuum. I walked across the polished marble floor, my heels tapping in a steady, controlled rhythm. My reflection trailed beside me along the glass walls. Calm face, steady breath, posture straight. From the outside, I looked composed. Inside, I was razor sharp. Behind me, someone called my name. Maeve! Ethan. I didn't turn. Not at first. Let him catch up. Let him decide whether to sprint or hesitate. He chose the latter, jogging after me with a mix of confusion and irritation on his face. Maeve, what the hell was that? He demanded, grabbing my arm. I stopped and turned slowly, letting my eyes meet his. Steady, unreadable. What was what? You embarrassed me, he hissed. Humiliated me in front of my entire team, in front of Richard, in front of everyone. I gave him a small, cold smile. Oh, Ethan, I said softly. That was barely the beginning. He stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. And maybe, for the first time in our relationship, he was finally seeing me clearly. What are you talking about? He pressed. What did you mean by all that? I stepped a bit closer, lowering my voice. You'll understand soon, I said. Trust me. He opened his mouth again, but before he could push further, a familiar voice called out from behind him. Ethan? Tessa. Perfect timing. She approached quickly, her heels clicking like impatient metronomes. Her expression was equal parts concern and suspicion. What's going on? She asked, glancing at me as though she might catch me stealing silverware. I didn't bother looking at her. Instead, I pulled my arm gently out of Ethan's grip. Don't stay up waiting, I told him simply. It's going to be a long night. And I walked out. He didn't follow me this time. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned. Streetlights passed like slow blinks. My phone buzzed a dozen times in the passenger seat, Ethan's name lighting up the screen again and again, but I didn't touch it. He'd get his answers tomorrow. Or more accurately, the entire company would. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. Ethan had left the porch light on, like he expected me to come home smiling, apologizing, ready to smooth things over so he could return to being the hero of his own narrative. I didn't even glance toward the living room. I walked straight to my office. My cave, as Ethan jokingly called it. The room he assumed I used for scrapbooking Pinterest ideas, journaling, or processing feelings. He never once asked what I actually did in here. He never wondered why the door was always locked. Tonight, he'd finally understand why. Inside the office, the air was still. My desk sat neat and organized, rows of labeled binders, dual monitors, a closed laptop, and one frame photograph of my father shaking my hand on the day I signed my very first contract. I stepped to the bookshelf and ran my hand across the spines until I found the book I needed. Principles of Corporate Structuring. Dry title, perfect cover. I pulled it outward. It clicked softly. A hidden wooden panel behind the shelf slid open with a mechanical hum. Inside, a small biometric safe blinked awake, its blue light waiting. I pressed my thumb against the scanner. A soft beep, then the lock released. Inside the safe, 2 flash drives, 5 signed merger agreements, a summary of my trust's holdings, and one thick black folder labeled Helix Primary Ownership. I pulled the folder out and laid it open on the desk. There, in crisp black ink, was the document Richard signed 15 years ago, the merger between Eclipse Innovations and Helix Dynamics. I traced the line with his signature, slanted, rushed, oblivious to its future weight. 15 years ago, Richard was running a company on life support. Helix was hemorrhaging money. Investors were fleeing. The board was planning to replace him. He was desperate, and I offered him an out. My company, Eclipse Innovations, merged with Helix on one condition. I would retain 90% ownership through a blind trust. Richard got to keep his title. I got control. It was a perfect deal for him, for me, for the future of Helix. For 15 years, I left him alone. Let him take the spotlight. Let him play CEO. Let him think he was the king. All while I quietly collected profits, expanded my investments, and built a life that no one, not even Ethan, fully understood. I didn't hide it because I was afraid. I hid it because I wanted simplicity. I'd spent so much of my life fighting to be taken seriously in male-dominated boardrooms that anonymity had felt like luxury. For years, I lived peacefully in the background, until Ethan's ego and his coworker's mouth forced me back into the light. My phone buzzed again. Ethan, what did you do? Everyone is panicking. What did you say to Richard? Maeve, answer me. I flipped the phone over, screen down. Not yet. I opened my laptop and clicked a secure icon on the desktop. A login screen appeared, asking for fingerprint, passcode, hardware key. I provided all 3. A video call window opened instantly. Isaac, my lawyer, my oldest friend, my only real confidant. He appeared on the screen, hair messy, glasses slipping down his nose. Maeve, it's 1 a.m, he groaned. Are you about to ruin someone's life? Several lives, I corrected, and a company's reputation. He sighed, but smiled. I assume you want to proceed? Yes, I said. Initiate the full internal audit of Helix Dynamics. Every department, every contract, every expense account. I want a report on my desk by tomorrow and a full audit by next week. Isaac's face sharpened instantly. That's going to start a war. It's overdue, I replied. He hesitated. Maeve, you've been silent for 15 years. They don't even know you exist. This audit is going to explode from the inside. I know. And you're sure this is about the company? He asked pointedly. Not about Ethan? I paused. Then I gave the only honest answer. It's about respect. Isaac nodded once. Then I'll start immediately. He ended the call, and I sat back, staring at the open ownership documents spread across my desk. For years, I'd stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed hidden, because it was easier. But tonight, in that ballroom full of people who thought they were above me, something old inside me woke up. Something hungry. Something ready. I gathered the papers back into the folder, leaving just one page on the desk. The original merger contract. The proof of who I really was. Not the broke girlfriend, not the freeloader, not the accessory. The owner. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Tomorrow, Helix Dynamics would remember exactly who built their throne. Tonight, they were still laughing. Tomorrow, they would kneel. The next morning, I woke early, before the sun had fully broken the horizon. The house was quiet, as it always was when Ethan wasn't home, peaceful, empty. I made myself a cup of coffee, took it to my office, and opened the laptop. The folder with the merger contract and ownership papers sat neatly to the side, but I knew there was no need to look at it again. The truth was already in motion. Isaac's message flashed on the screen, confirming what I already knew. The audit had begun. I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of what I had just set in motion settle over me. Ethan would soon understand exactly who he had been laughing at. At Helix Dynamics, the first ripple of panic hit just before noon. Isaac had made sure the internal audit would leave no stone unturned. It was thorough, comprehensive. The emails started coming in quickly. Memos, confidential communications, financial records, and all of them pointed to the same thing. Corruption. Richard Larson, the CEO, had been using his position for personal gain, unreported bonuses, padded expense accounts, contracts awarded to family members. The company had been bled dry for years, while the board members turned a blind eye. They thought no one would ever notice. They thought no one was watching. But I was watching, and I had the power to make it all public. Isaac's voice echoed in my mind as I reviewed the first batch of documents. This is going to cause chaos. Good, let it. By the time Ethan reached out again, the chaos was already growing, and he was deep in the middle of it. His first message came in the early afternoon. Ethan. Maeve, what is going on? People are freaking out. Richard doesn't know how to handle this. Someone's digging into the books. What did you do? The text sat on my phone screen for a few seconds before I typed my reply. Maeve, just sit tight, Ethan. This is something that needed to happen. I didn't explain. I didn't owe him an explanation. Not anymore. At 3 p.m., Isaac called again. You might want to brace yourself for this one, he said, his voice low but tinged with amusement. What now? I asked, already knowing this was about to escalate further. John Wilson, Isaac said, his voice dark. He's in deep. Turns out he's been funneling contracts to his cousin's construction business. It's all in the internal memos, and HR just put him on administrative leave pending an investigation. I couldn't help but smirk. Good, I said. One down, plenty more to go. Isaac chuckled. You've stirred the hornet's nest, Maeve, but it's all going according to plan. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my temples. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, to see everything that had been festering in the shadows come to light. The people who thought they were untouchable, John, Richard, and even Tessa, would soon be exposed for who they truly were. The lies they'd been living would crack wide open. But I wasn't done yet. I still needed Ethan to see the truth. By evening, the real storm had begun. Ethan's messages grew increasingly frantic. Ethan, Maeve, I don't understand what's happening. Is this you? People are asking questions. Everyone's pointing to an anonymous shareholder. Richard's saying it's a secret investor, but no one believes him. Maeve, keep playing dumb, Ethan. It'll make this easier. I didn't even flinch when I sent that message. I knew he was beginning to understand, even if he didn't want to admit it. He'd been blind to the reality of my life, of my power, for too long. The board, of course, hadn't figured it out yet. They were scrambling to find out who had set the audit in motion, but they didn't realize they were looking at the wrong person. They thought it was some faceless investor trying to clean house, some mysterious power that had arrived out of nowhere. And while they played their guessing game, I sat back and let them drown in the confusion. I let them sweat while the truth closed in around them. That evening, I received a call from Isaac. He was laughing, his voice full of approval. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "You'll want to hear this." "What now?" I replied, my voice dry. "They're in full panic mode. I just heard that Richard Larson is preparing to make a public statement about the audit. Try to spin it as a routine compliance check. But here's the kicker. John Wilson has already started scrambling, sending emails to people higher up, trying to shift the blame to you. And Tessa's been spreading rumors about how you blew everything up." A small laugh escaped my lips. "They think this is about them," I said. "Their reputation, their careers." "Of course," Isaac replied. "But what they don't realize is they're just characters in a much bigger play. You've already won." I leaned back in my chair, the cool hum of my laptop filling the silence. The game was almost over. Ethan wouldn't get a chance to hide behind his corporate facade for much longer. Soon, he would have to confront the truth. Soon, the world would see me for who I really was. Friday arrived faster than expected, and with it, the moment that would define everything. The whole building felt different that morning. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog, the kind that makes it hard to breathe, the kind that suffocates everything around it. Employees moved faster, their faces tense and nervous as they darted from one meeting to another. Phones buzzed endlessly. I could feel the ripple of panic from the moment I stepped into the lobby of Helix Dynamics. They had no idea what was coming. I walked through the familiar hallways, the same ones Ethan had once proudly given me a tour of, talking about his promotions and the corner office he dreamt of. The echoes of his words now felt hollow. The polished marble floors beneath my feet had absorbed too many false promises, too many secrets. I reached the elevator, pressing the button that would take me to the top floor, the boardroom where the final curtain would fall. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Ethan." "Maeve, please stop. This isn't the way to do this. I'm trying to help. Let's fix this together." I read the message. Then I locked my phone and slid it back into my pocket. There was no fixing this. There was no going back, not anymore. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and the boardroom was just as I remembered it. Sterile, organized, cold. Richard Larson was pacing near the reception desk, his face pale and drawn. He saw me immediately, but there was no warmth in his expression, just the nervous tension of a man who knew he was about to lose everything. He straightened up, trying to put on the mask of authority, but it was too late. "Maeve," he said, forcing a smile. "It's been a while. We're all just handling the situation, as best we can. No need to make this a bigger deal than it is." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I stepped past him, the sound of my heels echoing on the marble floor, and took my seat at the head of the table, the seat Richard used to occupy. It was as if I had just claimed my throne, and I wasn't about to give it back. The others started filing in, each member of the board looking like they'd just been told they were part of a heist. They were nervous, shifting in their seats, checking their phones for any shred of information to explain what was happening. Finally, Isaac arrived, briefcase in hand, looking far too casual for the storm brewing around us. He placed the briefcase on the table and, without waiting, opened it to reveal the folders full of incriminating documents. The murmurs died down, and I stood, looking at each member of the board, my gaze cold and steady. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice ringing out in the quiet room. "I'm sure you've all heard the rumors. Some of you have probably even seen the audit results already. I'll save you the trouble of pretending you don't know what's happening." Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I'd like to make this very clear," I continued, leaning forward slightly. "For the past 15 years, I've been watching, waiting. And today, we're going to talk about how this company has been mismanaged, how the board has been complicit in this, and how much money has disappeared into personal accounts, offshore funds, and secret perks." Richard tried to speak again. "Maeve, you can't do this. You can't—" "I already have," I interrupted. "Richard, I don't need to convince you. The documents are right in front of you." Isaac began handing out thick folders to each member of the board. The room was filled with the sound of paper shuffling as each person flipped through the contents of the folders. I watched them closely, studying their faces. Each expression morphed from disbelief to dread. They could see it now. The years of corruption, the inflated expenses, the fake contracts. There was nowhere to hide. Patricia Hensley, the only woman on the board, was the first to speak. She adjusted her glasses and flipped through the final page. "Is this accurate?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Every word," I said. "I want you to take your time, read carefully, because by the end of this meeting, you will realize just how much of this you've ignored. how many times you've chosen to turn a blind eye. Richard stood up, his hands shaking slightly. You can't just walk in here and fire me. This company is mine. I built this. No, I said flatly. You didn't. You signed over control a long time ago. It's always been mine. I let that hang in the air, watching as the weight of those words sank in. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Finally, Richard's voice cracked as he tried to regain some sense of control. You can't just make decisions for all of us, he stammered. I'm the CEO. You were the CEO, I corrected him, my tone sharp. Effective immediately. I'm dissolving your position. I'm reconstituting the board, and I'm removing you from the company. It's time to step aside. I didn't wait for his reaction. I slid a document across the table toward him. There's your termination letter, signed and sealed. You can either leave quietly, or security can escort you out. Richard froze, his face going pale as he read the words on the page. I can't believe this, he whispered, the fight draining out of him. No one cares what you believe anymore, I said coldly. The truth is here, Richard, and it's too late to change it. The room was silent for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the rustling of paper, the deep inhale of breath, and the faint hum of the building's air conditioning. Finally, someone cleared their throat. It was Patricia, the board member who had been quietly observing everything. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. And what happens now? She asked. You don't just take over a company like this and expect everything to run smoothly. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a strategist gives just before a final checkmate. Now, I said, we make the changes that should have been made years ago. We clean up this mess, starting with you. Patricia's eyes widened. She was about to protest, but I cut her off. Starting with John Wilson. His contract is terminated effective immediately. And don't think for a second I haven't seen the emails where you've been covering up for him. HR will begin the investigation into your involvement as well. Her face turned a deep shade of red as she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Now that we've handled that, I said, standing up, I'd like to introduce your new CEO. I gestured to Samantha Brooks, the quiet but brilliant VP of Engineering, who had been with the company for years but had been overlooked by everyone in favor of the louder, more arrogant voices. Samantha stood up and made her way to the front, her calm demeanor radiating confidence. She was going to be the leader this company deserved, a leader who earned respect, not one who demanded it. I turned back to the board. Samantha will be taking over effective immediately. I trust you will all cooperate with the changes that need to happen to restore this company's integrity. The board members looked at each other, but none of them objected. They knew it was over. Richard Larson stood up, his face red with rage and humiliation. You can't do this, he spat. You can't just ruin everything I've built. I won't let you. I didn't flinch. You already did that, I said quietly. I'm just cleaning up the mess you left behind. And with that, I turned and walked out, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their broken empire.
Let's.
Outside, I could already hear the whispers, the shock, the disbelief, but I didn't care. I'd done it. I'd taken back control. And now, I was going to make sure no one ever forgot it. The sound of the elevator doors closing behind me was the first piece of peace I'd had all day. I walked briskly through the corridors of Helix Dynamics, the echoes of my footsteps matching the quiet, calculating rhythm in my chest. The job was done. The board was reconstituted. Richard Larson was out, and I had just handed the company over to someone who could actually build it, someone who knew what real work looked like, someone who knew how to get things done without playing the game the way Richard had. But there was one thing left. One final truth to face. I'd been in control of the company for so long, hidden in the background, pulling the strings, waiting for the right moment to strike. But now that it was all out in the open, I knew there was one person I still needed to deal with. Ethan. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the front door, and there he was, sitting on the couch, his head in his hands, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The sight didn't surprise me. It was exactly what I expected. He looked up at me when I stepped inside, and for a moment, I almost saw the man I used to love, the one who said we were a team, the one who held my hand when I first told him I had been laid off and promised we'd get through it together. But that version of him was gone, and so was I. I don't get it, he said, his voice raw with frustration and confusion. You could have just told me. We could have worked through this. Why didn't you trust me? I let out a long breath, walking past him and setting my keys down on the counter. Trust you? I repeated, my voice calm but firm. You don't trust anyone, Ethan. You never did. Not really. He stood up, his face tense. That's not fair. I've been here for you through everything. I've supported you, even when you were pretending to be someone you weren't. We could have... No, I cut him off. You could have supported me, Ethan, but you didn't, not when it mattered. His jaw clenched, and his eyes started to flicker with frustration. But I saw something else there, too. Guilt. He was starting to realize the weight of what I was saying. You mocked me. You laughed with them, with Tessa. You called me a freeloader. You treated me like I was nothing. But you were wrong. I never needed your support. I didn't need anyone's approval. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. I didn't give him the chance to speak. I wasn't the one pretending, Ethan, I said, my voice now cold, precise. You were. You've been pretending to care about me while keeping yourself busy with your career, your ex, your image. But when the money dried up in your mind, you saw me as a liability, a joke. I could see it now. The realization was settling in. He was starting to understand how completely he had failed me. I wasn't the one who failed us, Ethan, I continued. I wasn't the one treating us like a project. I wasn't the one who wanted to look good at the expense of someone else's dignity. I wasn't the one who let people laugh at me, mock me, and humiliate me in front of everyone. I looked at him, my eyes steady, unblinking. You never once thought to ask what I needed. You never once wondered who I was underneath all of this. You never once saw the woman who built this. I built it, Ethan. I saved Helix, not Richard, not you, not anyone else. The words hung between us like a heavy weight. I let them settle, and then I said the one thing I knew he wasn't ready to hear. I don't need you anymore. His face fell, and for the first time I saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't angry anymore. He was hurt, and he had every right to be. But it wasn't my responsibility to fix him. It was too late. You're done here, I said quietly, my voice steady. Pack your things and leave. He stood there for a long moment, frozen, as though trying to process everything I had just said. The silence between us felt suffocating, but I didn't flinch. I never wanted to hurt you, he said softly, his voice cracking. I thought I was doing what was best for us. I didn't respond. The truth was too simple. He hadn't been doing what was best for us. He had been doing what was best for himself, what looked good on paper, what would elevate his career, what would make him feel secure. But he never truly considered what would make me feel secure, what I wanted. I turned my back on him and walked up the stairs. I'm done pretending too, I said over my shoulder. This is where you walk away. He called my name, but I didn't answer. I kept walking, each step harder than the last. Fine. Later that night, the house was empty. Ethan's things were gone, packed up into his car. The sound of his footsteps had faded into the distance, and I was left alone. It felt surreal, standing in the space we had once shared, but now it felt like mine again. This house, this life, everything I'd built, I had done on my own. I stood in front of the mirror, the woman who was staring back at me, a stranger and yet not a stranger. She was stronger than I had ever been before, more decisive, less afraid. I was ready for the next phase. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and changes. Helix Dynamics was unrecognizable now. The bloated executive perks were gone. The fake contracts and hidden deals had been exposed. The company was undergoing a complete transformation under Samantha Brooks, the new CEO. It wasn't just about cleaning house, it was about rebuilding it from the ground up. Isaac sent over the finalized audit report, and I couldn't help but smile when I saw the numbers. The company's financials were improving already. The shakeup had worked, and now people were starting to trust Helix again.
Down.
2 weeks later, the annual corporate gala was being held once more at the Belmont Grand Ballroom. The same place where they had mocked me. The same place where Ethan had laughed along with his coworkers, oblivious to everything I had quietly accomplished. This time, however, the room felt different. I felt different. The guests were different, too. The energy in the air had shifted from fear to hope. People no longer whispered in corners. They no longer stared at the walls of the ballroom, wondering who would get their chance to speak. They were speaking. They were listening. I looked across the room, and my eyes locked on Samantha, who was standing at the podium. She looked confident, poised, a true leader. The kind of leader I had always hoped this company would have. The applause was loud, genuine, and for the first time it felt like mine too. Samantha stepped aside, and the crowd grew silent, the focus now on me. She smiled, nodding toward me, and handed me the microphone. "Please welcome Maeve Morgan," she said. I walked up to the stage, my heels clicking in time with my heartbeat. I smiled, nodding toward the crowd. There were no sneers, no pity, no whispers. just respect. The people who had once laughed at me now stood and applauded, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of their admiration, not for the illusion of who I was, but for the truth. I took the microphone and looked out at the crowd, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. "Thank you," I said simply. "Tonight, we celebrate not just success, but second chances." The applause roared, and I didn't have to look back to know that the person I had once been had already disappeared. The woman standing before them now was something new, something powerful. I was no longer invisible. A few months passed, and the transformation at Helix Dynamics continued at a rapid pace. The company, once a shadow of its former self, was now thriving. The new leadership, under Samantha Brooks, had already begun making waves in the industry. The employees felt seen again, heard. The new culture was one of transparency, integrity, and ambition, and it felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the suffocating, ego-driven environment it had been under Richard Larson's rule. For me, the changes were just as profound, but not in the way most people expected. When I walked into the office now, it wasn't as the invisible shareholder. It wasn't even as the broke girlfriend they had once laughed at. I walked in as Maeve Morgan, the majority shareholder, the woman who had saved the company, who had reclaimed the power that had been stolen from her. I walked in as someone who owned her life, her choices, and her future. And yet, even though I had everything I needed, something felt unfinished. Something kept tugging at me, a quiet restlessness I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about the company or the success I had built. I had proven myself professionally. I had restructured Helix. I had turned the tables on those who once doubted me. But what about my personal life? What about the space I had spent so many years pretending didn't matter? It was a Saturday morning when I finally reached out to Ethan. For weeks I had pushed the thoughts of him away. His face, his words, his betrayal. I had focused on the company, on rebuilding what I had spent so long neglecting in order to survive. But there was still a part of me, a small, quiet part, that wondered if there was any chance of reconciliation. Not for the sake of what we once had, but for the sake of closure. He had texted me several times after I told him to leave. Each message was a plea for understanding, for an explanation. Each message had felt like a mirror to the shame I had buried deep within myself when I had allowed him to diminish me. But now, sitting at my kitchen table on a rainy Saturday morning, I realized I owed myself more than just success. I owed myself peace. I dialed his number. "Hello?" he answered after the first ring, his voice hesitant, as if he wasn't sure I would be the one on the other end. "It's me," I said softly, my fingers trembling slightly as I held the phone. "Ethan, I think we need to talk." There was a long pause, a silence so thick it felt like the years between us. Then, finally, he spoke. "Maeve, I'm sorry. I don't know how to say this, but I've been lost without you. I know I messed up, and I know there's no way to fix it. I can't believe I let you down like that." I closed my eyes, letting the sincerity of his words wash over me. It had taken this long, but he was finally admitting what I had always known deep down, that he had never seen me for who I truly was, that he had used me to build his own life, while I had been the one making all the sacrifices. I felt a pang of something in my chest, but it wasn't anger. It was something different, something softer. Maybe it was grief, or maybe it was just the weight of time. "I don't hate you, Ethan," I said quietly, "but we're not the same people anymore. I'm not the person you left behind." Another long pause. "I know," he said. "I can see that now. You've built something incredible, Maeve. I don't deserve any part of that. But I just want you to know that I'll always care about you. I'll always be sorry for how I treated you." "I don't need your apology anymore," I told him, my voice firm. "What I needed was respect. What I needed was for you to see me as equal, not as someone you had to carry. I gave you that chance, and you let me down." There was a deep sigh on the other end of the line. "I understand, and I will always regret it." "You don't have to regret it," I said, feeling a finality settle over me. "You just need to let it go. And so do I." Another pause. "I'm letting go," he whispered. "I hope you find the peace you deserve, Maeve." I hung up the phone, setting it down gently on the table. A strange calmness washed over me, as if I had just let go of something heavy I'd been holding for far too long.
Hey.
The weeks that followed were filled with personal reflection, growth, and small, quiet victories. I spent more time with Samantha, who had become a friend as well as a business partner. Together, we began implementing long-term strategies for the company that would secure its future and empower the employees who had been silenced for so long. I began to see the world in a different light. No longer was I chasing approval from anyone, not from Ethan, not from the board, not from the men and women who thought they could control me. I had learned the hard way that the only person's approval I needed was my own. I took long walks in the evenings, often alone, letting the cool air clear my mind. I didn't think about business or the deals I had closed or the empire I was building. I just allowed myself to be, to exist without the weight of expectations pressing down on me. And then, one afternoon, as I walked through the park near my home, I saw something that made my heart skip. It was Richard Larson, standing by the fountain, looking exactly as he had the day I had walked into the boardroom. But this time, there was no confident posture, no facade of power. He looked small, lost. He saw me from across the park and hesitated, his eyes flicking away, as if trying to decide whether to approach. I walked past him without a word. No need to acknowledge him. No need for closure with someone who had already lost. As the months passed, Helix Dynamics continued to thrive under Samantha's leadership. We made meaningful strides toward diversity, equity, and inclusion. Employees were encouraged to speak up, and their voices were finally heard. We focused on building a company that valued its people above profits. Meanwhile, my personal life flourished as well. I nurtured my relationships with the people who truly mattered, people who had stood by me, seen me, and supported me from the beginning. Friends, colleagues, even mentors, those were the relationships I cherished. And for the first time in my life, I realized that the one person I'd been missing all along was me. I had fought for so long to prove my worth to others, to prove that I was worthy of love, respect, and success. But the only person I ever needed to convince was myself. The journey wasn't over. It would never truly be over. There would always be challenges, always be hurdles. But I had learned the most important lesson of all. I was enough. And that was everything.